Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, as that will help grow my channel. If you'd like to subscribe, I'd appreciate that as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave those and I will respond. Again, thank you. Here you can see the tools required in order to make a ring. I had purchased a ring sizer, a ring mandrel. I already had the tools to cut the copper pipe with and also the digital calipers, as well as a propane torch in order to heat up the copper pipe. So I purchased two sizes of copper pipe, 1/2 inch as well as 5/8, and tried to get as close as I could to the actual finished ring size. I did find that when heating and stretching the ring, it was possible to go up to 2 sizes larger, but any more than that was difficult to do. So you had to have a close size pipe to start with. I also found that I couldn't stretch it out all in one try. Typically, it would only stretch about 1/4 of a size each time I heated it up. So I had to do this multiple times until I got the final size required. You want to keep checking the ring with the actual sizer, because obviously you can make the ring bigger. It's difficult to make it smaller. So the next step in the process, I've got the copper insert all sized properly. So the next step is to actually start cutting the antler, hollowing it out to accept the copper insert. So what I did is off the root of the antler, the base, I cut off a couple rings, discs that I could use that are big enough. Surprisingly, I thought I could get it almost anywhere, but it was really only at the root that was big enough in diameter. It's also a good section to use because it's got the most color variation in it as well, so it makes it more interesting. So all I did was I put my brass insert up on the ring, the disc that I've cut, and you can see I've got lots here for thickness. That probably would have been, probably could have gotten 2 out of that, but I left it big intentionally. And I just kind of centered that on there, and you'll notice I've cut a piece off. This actually had a bit of a lump out the side here. I just took my bandsaw and cut that off, just so when I go to center it in my chuck, it'll center a bit easier. Had I left that lump on it, it would have pushed it over to the side, and I was afraid that I might have gotten into this edge. So now I think I'm good. I'm gonna take this over to the lathe, put it in my chuck, and we'll start hollowing that out until it'll accept this copper insert. The antler is porous, so I want to make sure that I get glue, lots of glue on the inside surface. And this is CA glue, super glue. Make sure I get lots on the inside there because, again, it is porous. I'll put a little bit on the copper as well, but I've got lots inside there, so it should be good. Now, I'm going to go ahead and press this in. And it's a happy accident, but the bolt that I have in my drill press actually is the same size as a copper ring, but actually fits inside the antler disc. So once I get it inside, I think I can just go inside and continue to push it in the disc even after it's inside. Here we go, it's in now. I'm just going to bury it a little bit deeper. And again, because of that taper, I'm going to keep pushing it until I can't go any further, and then I'll know that's a tight fit. And it's pretty well snugged up there. Again, it was a little loose on the top, but not on the bottom. So that works to my favor. So pushing that in there, I've got a nice snug fit. I'm going to let that glue dry up, and then we'll clean it up. In order to turn the outside of the ring down, I used a number of different tools. First of all, I started with a scraper. The Antler is actually very hard, so I ended up switching to my carbide tools, which seem to do a better job at cutting the Antler. Unfortunately, I don't have the video of where I cut the two grooves into the ring, but for this I used my diamond-shaped carbide cutter. I marked the two concentric rings and then just used my diamond cutter to cut a groove in the antler to accept the copper wire. Full disclosure, I did end up putting a couple different inlays in for a number of reasons. I had one pop out, didn't have enough glue, the groove wasn't deep enough. Then I tried again, and when I went to sand it down, I ended up sanding too much off the wire inlay itself, and then that broke. So I think on the third or fourth try, I ended up finding a combination that works. The right depth of groove and the right amount of sanding on the wire so that the wire stayed in place. When I started to put the wire into the groove, what I did was put a little bit of glue at the beginning of the wire section and then just slowly work my way around the ring, adding a little more glue, pushing the wire inlay into the groove, and continuing that way. I should mention, while placing the inlay, I tended to use a metal tool, either needle nose pliers or just the shaft of my carbide tools themselves. The reason for this is that allowed me to push a lot harder on the inlay, and also the metal tended not to stick with the glue. If I used my fingers at this point, what tended to happen was I would tear a lot of skin off my fingers, and that would end up getting deposited on the ring, and that's a little bit unsightly. It's critical when the two ends of the inlay come together. You want it to be a tight fit so that you don't have any gap. So I used my pliers and made very small cuts to get it close, and then filed it down the ends of them so that when the two ends met, they were quite tight. Here I am doing the final sanding of the inlays and the ring itself. By this time, because I had actually put a couple different inlays in, each time it got a little bit smaller, but that worked in my favor because it was a little too big too thick to start with, so it did make it a bit thinner. And here I just did my final sanding. And what you want to do is try and sand the copper inlay approximately 50% of the way through so that you have the maximum width to your inlay. Normally, if I'm turning a pen, my finish of choice would be CA glue. Your hands, oil in your hands is very hard for finishes. Unfortunately, CA glue reacts negatively with the copper. It would discolor it. So I couldn't use the CA glue as a finish. I ended up using an ultraviolet resin. This is a resin that I purchased. It is ultraviolet, so it does need to be cured with a light. So I also purchased a light so that I could cure the resin. To apply the resin, I just brushed it on in thin layers and slowly built up a couple coats and cured it in between. I'd like to wish both Mark and Jessie a big congratulations on their wedding, and I hope that they will cherish this ring for a long time to come.